Let's rewind to the year 1692, deep in the heart of colonial New England, to a small isolated settlement called Salem Village, Massachusetts. Today, the name Salem instantly conjures images of witches and dark legends, but back then, it was just a struggling Puritan community, surrounded by dense forests and uncertainty. Life here was harsh and unforgiving. The winters were bitter, the land was tough to farm, and the threat of disease or attack was never far away. But the greatest danger, as it turned out, would come from within. This was no Halloween party, it was a real crisis, fueled by fear and superstition. In Salem, the line between the natural and supernatural was razor thin. People truly believed the devil could walk among them, and that evil could hide behind the most familiar faces. In this tight-knit Puritan community, suspicion was a way of life. Neighbors watched each other closely, always on the lookout for signs of sin or witchcraft. The fear of the devil was everywhere, woven into sermons, whispered in homes, and lurking in every unexplained illness or misfortune. The rules were strict, the religion even stricter, and everyone was expected to conform. Any hint of rebellion, any odd behavior could make you a target. In Salem, everyone was both a potential accuser and a potential suspect. One accusation could ruin your life, or end it. The mere suggestion of witchcraft was enough to turn friends into enemies and neighbors into informants. The justice system was swift, unforgiving, and often based on little more than rumor or fear. It all started with a handful of young girls who began to act strangely, convulsing, screaming, and accusing others of witchcraft. What began as a few odd incidents quickly spiraled out of control, exploding into a frenzy of accusations, public trials, and ultimately, executions. The Salem Witch Trials became a chilling lesson in the dangers of mass hysteria, unchecked power, and the consequences of letting fear override reason. Families were torn apart, reputations destroyed, and innocent lives lost, all because of suspicion and panic. So, buckle up, because we're about to journey into one of the darkest, most haunting chapters in American history, where fear ruled the day and reason was left behind. How did Salem spiral into chaos? To understand the infamous witch trials, we have to look beyond the surface and dig into the tangled roots of fear, hardship, and suspicion that gripped this small New England village. It wasn't just superstition, it was a perfect storm of circumstances. Salem in the late 1600s was a place where anxiety simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for a spark. Life was brutal. The winters were long and punishing, food was often scarce, and disease could sweep through the settlement without warning. Every day was a struggle for survival, and the threat of starvation or illness was never far away. With no science to explain their misfortunes, people blamed the supernatural. When crops failed or livestock died, it was easier to believe in curses and witches than to accept the randomness of fate. Salem Village and Salem Town were locked in bitter feuds over land and power, fueling resentment. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, and old grudges simmered for years, waiting for a reason to boil over. The Puritans' black and white worldview left no room for doubt. Everything was either God or the devil. Their strict religious beliefs demanded conformity, and anyone who stepped out of line was seen as a threat to the community's very soul. Add in trauma from recent wars, violent conflicts with Native Americans, and the constant fear of attack, and you had a community on edge, primed for panic. Many families had lost loved ones, and the scars of violence ran deep. When the first accusations flew, old grudges and deep fears erupted. The village became a battleground of suspicion where anyone could be the next target. It wasn't just one thing, it was everything, all at once. The hardships, the fear, the anger, and the uncertainty all collided, creating a perfect environment for hysteria to take hold. Salem was a powder keg, and in 1692, it finally exploded. The witch trials were not just a product of superstition, but of a community pushed to its breaking point by forces both seen and unseen. The cast of the Salem Witch Trials was unforgettable. It started with young girls, Abigail Williams and Betty Paris, whose bizarre fits set the town on fire. Their accusations targeted society's outsiders, Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba, the enslaved servant. Tituba's confession, likely coerced, only fueled the hysteria. Judges like John Hathorne led the charge, presuming guilt and demanding confessions. Skeptics like John Proctor, who spoke out, were quickly accused themselves. Soon, no one was safe. Outcasts, Churchgoers, even respected leaders fell under suspicion. The trials showed how quickly fear can turn a community against itself. In Salem, anyone could be next. The trials escalated fast. Courtrooms became theaters of chaos, with the afflicted girl's dramatic fits as the main act. Accused witches faced impossible odds. Denial meant more hysteria, confession meant implicating others. Tituba's wild confession set the tone, confirming the judge's worst fears. The Court of Oyer and Terminer was created to handle the flood of cases. Bridget Bishop was the first to hang, her execution marking a deadly turning point. The jails overflowed, and the web of accusations grew. The message was clear: the authorities were deadly serious. Salem was now a place where fear ruled, and people died for it. Why did so many join the witch hunt? It wasn't just madness, it was survival. Old grudges and jealousy found a new weapon: accusation. The accusers, especially the girls, suddenly held real power. Mass hysteria took hold, fear is contagious, and peer pressure was intense. Speaking out meant risking your own life, so most people went along. Witchcraft was an easy answer for life's hardships, giving people a false sense of control. Pointing fingers became a way to protect yourself or settle a score. In Salem, suspicion was safer than skepticism. The Salem trials were a disaster of justice, a tragic chapter in American history. Spectral evidence, claims of being attacked by invisible spirits, was accepted as proof in court. Confessing meant survival, so false admissions piled up, feeding the growing hysteria in Salem. Bizarre tests like searching for witches' marks turned superstition into deadly policy and practice. The result? 19 hanged, 1 pressed to death, and countless lives destroyed forever. Families were shattered, property seized, and trust between neighbors obliterated. The community paid a terrible price for its fear and ignorance, leaving scars for generations. Salem became a lesson in how not to run a justice system, a warning echoed through time. The hysteria that had gripped Salem for months finally began to unravel when accusations reached the highest levels of society. Suddenly, no one was immune, not even the governor's own wife. The panic that had swept through the town, once fueled by fear and suspicion, now threatened the very people who held power. As the web of accusations grew, it became clear that the madness could consume anyone, regardless of status or reputation. Doubt crept in as respected citizens, people known for their honesty and integrity, were led to the gallows, still proclaiming their innocence with their final breaths. The community began to question how so many upstanding neighbors could suddenly be guilty of such impossible crimes. The sorrow and disbelief grew with each execution, and the weight of collective guilt began to settle over Salem. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Influential ministers, once silent or complicit, began to speak out against the trials and the use of spectral evidence, testimony based on dreams and visions. Their voices carried weight, urging the community to reconsider the path they were on. Sermons denounced the injustice, and the seeds of doubt blossomed into calls for mercy and reason. Governor Phipps, recognizing the chaos and injustice, intervened. He shut down the special court that had fueled the frenzy, bringing the executions to an end. The machinery of accusation and punishment ground to a halt, and the community was left to reckon with the consequences of its actions. In the aftermath, Salem struggled to heal. The town issued formal apologies, offered compensation to the families of the accused, and overturned wrongful convictions. But no amount of restitution could erase the pain or bring back the innocent lives lost. The scars of the trials lingered, a constant reminder of the dangers of unchecked fear. The Salem Witch Trials left a permanent scar on the town and on American history, a warning about the destructive power of fear, extremism, and mob justice. The names of the victims, etched in stone, serve as a silent testament to the consequences of abandoning reason and compassion. Salem's story endures as a powerful lesson. True justice demands reason, evidence, and the courage to stand against the crowd, even when it's difficult. It reminds us to question, to think critically, and to protect the rights of the vulnerable. In the end, the real monsters are not those we imagine in the shadows, but the ones we create when we let fear and suspicion take control of our hearts and minds.